great. I know we have guests joining us, the middle school building committee, to join us today and present. So want to make sure that we're trying to keep on schedule. So thanks for starting off. So first couple things, hopefully everyone received the meeting packet. And we've got a lot to cover, as I mentioned. So I'm going to try and move through this fairly quickly to get to the middle school building committee presentation. But one of the things that came up the last meeting was the April 21st meeting date. And I know that falls, I believe, on the school vacation. So just wanted to check in with CAB members on who will have a conflict and whether we should move that meeting date. Courtney, I believe you had a conflict the last time, right?
Yep, still do.
Okay.
Yeah, but we have to say in front of Dr. Hunter that if you go away somewhere, you have to come back and test and all that, right?
Right.
Thank you.
You must align with all protocols.
Right.
Of course.
So I can move it. We can move it back a week if others don't have a conflict with that. So I guess that would be the 28th of April. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but I'm happy to do that if it'll have a better chance of us having, a good quorum.
Mhm.
Are there any concerns with moving back a week? And I guess, Kate, are there any concerns knowing that we're approaching town meeting with that versus moving it up a week?
Just gonna check the calendar because that week I think is when the hearings start, and you wouldn't conflict with any of that. So let me just double check.
Okay.
It looks like the hearings start that week, but the 28th, there's not a hearing. So I think you'd be okay with the 28th.
Okay. Just looking at my schedule as well. Yeah, either of those work. So if there's any preference, let me know. Otherwise, we'll plan on the 28th.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good. Yep, sounds good.
Okay, great. Let's, I don't believe we need a vote to change that. So let's just plan on the 28th, same time. The next item on the agenda is approval of or review any feedback on the notes from last meeting, which are in your packet. Do any CAB members have feedback on the notes? Any concerns with any parts of it? No? Okay. I had a couple of things I noticed just in the Rex discussion, but it's nothing major. So I think especially since we have the recording, I think it's fine. I think there was a lot of dialogue, and so it's hard to summarize everything. So I think I'm fine moving forward with approval. And I guess I'd need to get a vote on that. So if everyone could raise your hands, CAB members, if you, someone please make a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Warren. Courtney is seconded. All in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting? Great. Awesome. And thank you for the thumbs up, John. Okay. Meeting minutes are approved. Next item is my update. I am going to pass the torch on chair's update. We've got some home energy score stuff I'm going to review here. I know Kate has a couple of topics to cover as well, and we've got guests today. So let's keep things moving, and I'll hand it over to Kate.
Great. So I put in the packet a written director's update, so I'll also keep it short so we can move on to the middle school presentation. But one thing I really wanted to highlight was the launching of the new Concord Clean Comfort program. So this is CMLP's comprehensive program around heat pump support. So part of that is heating and cooling coaches that will help residents and businesses figure out if heat pumps are a good fit, find an installer, review quotes. A really, really good resource. So I encourage you to check it out. I know Ruthie said she had one of her coaches already, so that's
Mhm.
great. But the website
Excellent.
is
Yeah,
live.
I've had
and-
3 contractors come and they already have 1 quote, so they're moving.
That's
Excellent.
awesome. Yeah, CMLP and Janicetti especially put a lot of work into it. So definitely check out the website and keep me posted if you have any feedback or if you take advantage of any of the resources on there. And then there's a couple events that I highlighted that are coming up. A water conservation program that I'm working on with the library and water and sewer. And then a League of Women Voters climate policy discussion on Monday that I'll be speaking at with our local legislators. So I will stop there because I know we have a lot to on the middle school, but any quick questions on my update?
You know, I did have a chance to look at the Concord Clean Comfort, and I thought that the way it was, this is sort of the second go around of sort of developing a process, and it's really cool. It's like 5 steps. You know, they've broken all of that, you know, language down. There was like 6 or 7 pages of what you would do if you wanted to put, you know, heat pumps into your house, and they broke it into 5 steps. And to have the coaches sort of provide that concierge handholding, that has to help us start to get the numbers up where we know they have to be in order to, you know, transition to this. So it's a great step forward.
Can you hear? It's fine, dear. Thank you.
Well, I guess I will hand it off to the middle school building committee, which as you know, I am a member of, and really excited for you to hear an update on the project. There's a lot to cover, and I know we did our best to keep it as high level as possible because there's, you know, you can get into so many details on this stuff, and there'll be a lot more to come. But really excited to give you all an update on where the project is, what are the sustainability features that are already planning to be incorporated into the building, and get your thoughts and feedback and questions. So I think I'll hand it over to Kristen. Are you going to start us off?
Sounds good. So I did want to make mention briefly that as far as the team here, I'm Kristen Olson, the project manager with SMMA. Martine Dion is with me. She's our sustainability director with SMMA, and some of you may know her as well from past work. Stephen Moore is on with us. He's from Stephen Winter. He's on the team for sustainability as our passive house resource. And then we also do have Ian Parks from Hill International, the owner's project manager, joining us. And of course, our lead, Lori Hunter, superintendent and champion of the educational program. So I will go ahead and start sharing the PowerPoint here. As Kate mentioned, we did try to pick some very high level slides to catch some people up. For those of you who have been following closely, it's going to be a little bit more familiar, but we wanted to get to the Q&A as quickly as possible because we know hearing your voices is the most exciting and critical part of the project. So just as a recap, we had started this effort over a year ago and completed a preliminary scope and cost information in April of 2020. We put the project on hold with COVID and a lot of risk on not getting fully out there with the community because so much was changing. And so the project went on hold, and then we picked it up again in December of 2020 with the educational plan. For the design process of a school, it's critical to start with an education plan. So we really, Lori's team did a great job with the middle school putting together the ed plan, which is available on the building project website. And I'd highly recommend taking a read. And then we started then with the ed plan in hand to do a deep dive on the project scope and cost and so on in January. So we get a lot of questions about there are a lot of folks who are looking for things now that are actually kind of in later phases of the project. So I think it's really important to outline where we are is the feasibility study, and our current work will go through schematic design, which will go through the end of this year. In feasibility study, it's a very high level process. It's about pinning down the site, ed plan, building square footage, site constraints, conceptual plans, not detailed plans, but very high level plans, and some very big picture elements. Once those are approved, then with that one building concept, we move into much more detail, and a lot more detail in sustainability tends to start picking up in schematic design. So right now we're at very high level goal status, and once we get into the building concept development and schematic design, we'll start getting into life cycle cost analysis and systems and so on. So again, starting with the fact that this is school first and foremost, and the town permitted a budget with the cost range of $80 to $100 million in total project cost. So that's a goal that's known, and we're sticking to that. Combining the two middle schools into one. The design enrollment is for 700 students, which was the result of some demographic analysis that we performed early on with the school department. Team teaching model is critical here. In middle schools, you can choose a junior high style or a team teaching model, and this is a team teaching model, which Lori can elaborate on if there are questions on that. And then also in the fundamentals and in the core of the goals is a net zero ready facility. So our work to date has been bringing information to the subcommittees, getting feedback, coming back to the subcommittees, to the community, and then going on to the building committee for final decisions. Right now, we're in one of those loops with the community feedback, and we really have been getting a lot of great information from these. So we look forward to getting to that part of this evening. Right now, we've just launched into our concept development. So for anyone who had a chance to look at the design subcommittee meeting on Tuesday, we presented some of the very first floor plan updates and site plan updates. So if you hadn't had a chance, they are recorded, and again on the project website if you want to get a glimpse of those. And we have an upcoming community forum on the 31st that I would encourage everyone to attend. That's being published and the word's being gotten out about that as quickly as possible, where we'll have a lot more input on the greater level. So once we complete concept development, we'd go into reports and then launch into schematic design. So that's about where we are in the process. So again, just starting with the root middle school goals about community, high achievement, lifelong learning, and just some pages from the educational plan. That's a very, very in-depth document that explains what spaces are required and how teaching will occur in the building. The team teaching model is around creating these core teams that are comprised of English, social studies, math, science. And for one grade level, there would be 3 of those teams. So 3 grades, 3 teams, and that all adds up to the 700 student enrollment target. That also breaks down to about 19 to 20 students per class, which is all in alignment with the Concord Public Schools goals. Some highlights kind of from the program, again, on the website, or if you want to ask questions, we also have more slides on it, but there's a very detailed list of spaces, everything down to offices and storage and maintenance and mechanical, very detailed list that's available on what makes up the square footage that we're looking at. But some general highlights is that we do have currently in the plan a gymnasium that is sized for 1 MIAA basketball court, an alternate PE space for fitness equipment, dance, physical therapy. Music and performance is accommodated with a 1 grade level auditorium. We're having about 270 seats is what we're estimating right now. And then an orchestra room and a band room with music that share those. It's atypical for a middle school to have an auditorium, but we understood that to be a very large priority in Concord, so that's part of the program. And then again, Concord, when you look into the ed plan, you'll see that there's a very robust world language program. So there's a significant dedication of space to world language classrooms. To art rooms, 3 sub-separate programs for special education. That is a lot of space that's really tailored to delivering special education in the best environment possible for those programs. Media center, also known as library in some, depending on the community, and a maker space where kids can create and get messy and maybe make a mask for their English class or something like that. So those are some of the fun spaces with education. And family, consumer science, and technology also in core. So here's what that list looks like, just way zoomed out, and it totals 142,995 gross square feet. So after revisiting the whole program this in the earlier part of this year, we really did a lot of refinements to the space, and even with some of the adds of an auditorium, which wasn't in the plan last year, we've added the auditorium. Still, with all the adjustments, we are 1,000 gross square feet less than where we were in March 2020. So that's kind of, I just want to make sure you guys had the context of the building as a root and core, and now I'll hand it over to Martine for the sustainability overview.
So just a little bit of an overview of where we are now and what is a what is a given for the project, and then we'll go over in a little bit more detail into one of the major goal of the project, which is the net zero energy ready. So the project obviously is going to be compliant with the Massachusetts Energy Code, stretch code. Concord is a green community. And so the stretch code is 10% better than the basic. And we're going to definitely be over that by the project goals. That's one of our mandate. We need to meet that code. And the second major goal is the fact the project is striving to be net zero energy ready. And that means that we are going to target an EUI, an energy use intensity of 25 or better. The project will be fully electric heating, cooling, kitchen, with the exception of the emergency generator, which will be, I believe, diesel. The project has a goal to be very close and staying very close in terms of an approach and a strategy to the passive house principles. So the EUI target, we're going to have a highly insulated building enclosure. We are striving for very good air infiltration reduction close to passive house, and the project includes a whole building air infiltration testing. The project is also going to have mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and building enclosure commissioning. And we're going, of course, to the typical strategies for net zero energy in terms of systems, super high efficiency lighting, not only for the light power density, but also with control systems that will be able to be monitored, programmed, and will be also very user-friendly for the teachers with task tuning and such. And one of the most important, and some of you that know me have heard me talk about this a lot, plug load management. So we are designing the schools so that the majority or a large part of the plug load, so the electrical outlets and a lot of the equipment will be programmed and monitored to reduce the overall equipment load. Next.
Martine, I think you have a question from Pamela, if you want to take that.
Sure.
Did we actually, if I could suggest, I don't know what you think, Kate, and if we should hold all questions till the end, that way we can take the slides down and maybe give better attention to.
Yeah, this is Jake. I would agree.
Okay.
If we could take questions at the end, if people could just note their questions, and then we do have a combination of CAB members and members of the public. So typically we start with CAB members and then open it up to other folks for questions. So I'd like to like to keep that. Thank you.
Right, and excuse me, we're going to give you a sort of a general overview here. And in the questions, we may be able to go into more details about the project's sustainability and energy performance goals. So just to give you a little bit of context, there are more than 15, I think we're close to 20 now in Massachusetts, projects that are seeking net zero energy ready or net zero energy. The ones in bold are SMMA projects. So we have about 5, and that's not including Concord. And most of these projects are seeking EUIs, target goals for EUIs between 25 and 30. Next. In terms of our SMMA projects, we have right now the Lincoln Elementary School, which is seeking a 23.6. This is where we're tracking right now with Lincoln. It's a major retrofit of a 1-story, 165,000 square foot elementary school. We also tested Lincoln with the COVID, so the COVID strategies that have been brought upon by ASHRAE, and that of course impacts the EUI a little bit. It's in construction, and Wellesley is we're getting very close to the completion of the construction document, and the town had a requirement of 30, but we have the project as a target between 25 and 30, and we're tracking there right now at 60% CDs. And to give you a little bit of a benchmark or comparison, your existing sandboard is at 135. So we're going to drastically reduce with this new school, we're going to drastically reduce the energy use per square foot of the building. Kristen gave an overview of the project phasing and what are the sort of the areas we covered per different, per the phasing. So in terms of sustainability in the feasibility study, we had good amount of conversation around the energy performance down to the systems. We looked at different building energy systems. We talked a lot about the target, obviously. We did a little bit of box energy models. And we discussed certification opportunities. In schematic design, we're gonna, as Kristen said earlier, we're gonna dive a little more in there. We're gonna do a good amount of energy modeling. That energy modeling is gonna support a 50-year life cycle cost assessment, full life cycle cost assessment that will look at the energy system. So we will look at the mechanical systems, but we will look at it with the context of the building enclosure, the electrical system, plug load, etc. We'll look at daylighting. We'll look at the PV readiness. By code, the project has to be PV ready. And this project is looking for readiness to allow a net zero, full net zero at some point in the future. And then we'll also discuss the certification, the LEED certification path, whether we go certifiable or certified and at what level. Next. And as we go through the following phases of design, we are going to continue to track and monitor all those benchmarks: energy, daylight, embodied carbon, solar, renewable energy. So those are, we're going to continue to do modeling, and we're going to, of course, start implementing and developing all the systems, the detailing along those lines in design development and construction document. Next. And then during construction, same thing, we track and document. Even if we go LEED certifiable, the specifications are written so that all the sustainable attributes are tracked throughout the construction phase. And of course, post-occupancy, we are going to be there alongside with you to figure out and see how we make that EUI 25 or better. I think this is Matt. This is something you're going to address. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Matt Root. I am the chair of the Sustainability Subcommittee for the middle school project. And happy to be here and happy to have a discussion with you and get your feedback and thoughts. Michael, I know you attended our second meeting from restarting, which was a messy one, because we were still kind of in the middle of it. But we did complete 3 meetings in the early part of this year and got to a good place ultimately, and made a recommendation to the full committee, which was approved. Was that last week? 2 weeks ago? Recently. So. I want to provide a quick overview of what the sustainability subcommittee recommended to the full committee and was adopted without any changes by the full committee. So first, just at a high level, we had this framework that we had been working under. This had been approved back a year ago prior to going into the COVID pause, but we made some small tweaks to the language as our thinking and the project has developed, but in general, these are the guiding principles that the subcommittee is operating under. And I won't read this to you, but it is all in a consolidated document that I believe Kate has shared with you or will share with you. So we have 6 high-level goals that we are focusing on. Occupants, both student and teachers and staff, health and quality of life is certainly at the top. And then also this is a school, and we want to make sure that we're inspiring a passion for our students, both hopefully on sustainability, but also in whatever subject piques their interest. Martine mentioned a lot about Passive House. I mean, we have definitely taken the approach that we want to focus on efficiency first, and that is the primary guiding principle that we are focusing on, and that's why we have adopted much of the framework of Passive House. My guess is that we probably won't get Passive House certification, and so we've taken a slightly different tact that I'll get into on the next slide here, but that's still at the core of our effort, is focusing on efficiency first. We also would like to focus on embodied carbon. This is something that the industry has really started to recognize as much more of an issue. There has traditionally been a very operational carbon focus on how we're thinking about greenhouse gas emissions with regards to our buildings, and we as an industry have made great strides and been successful in kind of driving down that operational carbon, but we've been neglecting the embodied carbon, and embodied carbon is really important because those emissions happen now. I mean, they happen before we even open the building, before we start teaching classes. Those emissions get released, and emissions now are kind of more critical and more impactful on our efforts to kind of mitigate the effects of climate change now compared to the emissions that will happen in 10 years. So we really want to start to look at and think critically about embodied carbon. All electric has been in the plan from early on, from the amendment that Brad and Charlie attached to the initial funding request to the town, and that's certainly I'm sure everyone on this committee is well aware of the value of that in the strategy of driving down the impacts of this project and the emissions associated with its energy consumption. And then number 6 is the solar ready and the storage ready. I mean, the storage ready, that has been added by CMLP, and so we have happily adopted that, but CMLP is going to require some form of battery storage associated with the PV. we have the ready on there. I know that there has been a number of discussions about ready versus a full commitment. I will let's see, I guess my perspective is we really need to be focusing on energy efficiency and embodied carbon first. And the town has started to take steps, and Kate can talk more about this with regards to moving through solar through CMLP, and which I makes sense to me, and I think is the right step. And so kind of taking the actual installation of PV panels and battery storage out of the purview of the building committee and putting it under CMLP. And so what the building committee is going to focus on is that being PV ready, being EV electric ready, and being super efficient and minimizing our embodied carbon. So these are our 6 kind of guiding goals. And then we have developed a number of kind of specific metrics and ways in which we will be evaluating our success at meeting those goals. And the one big one is we've sought to leverage the easy code. So this is a Massachusetts. This is a group of many groups within the state that put forward to the BBRS within Massachusetts, the building code officials, as a way to have a high efficiency energy code. It has not been picked up. It has not been adopted, but I guess it's been adopted within the town of Concord for our middle school project is one way to look at it. And what this has done is it has nicely captured a strategy and kind of guidelines to help make sure that we as a project are on a target to, or on a pathway to delivering a highly efficient building. And we had a big ugly spreadsheet with lots of different metrics before this. We had also, have talked about Passive House, and I think many of us would still like to pursue Passive House certification. I think the reality of actual certification is maybe not a level that we will get to. Certainly we will still leverage many of those principles and those ideas from Passive House, but the fact that we won't be able to get certification meant that we kind of needed some other program to really hang our hat on, because the inspired by or LEED certifiable has value, but there's also limitations in that value. And so we really wanted to find something that was concrete and was specific, and that we could hold the line on. And so the easy code makes sense. And I'm happy to dive into the specifics of the easy code, but at a very high level, it has many very specific criteria and requirements in that any project that complies with will deliver a very super efficient building. So that's the easy code. That's energy. That's solar ready, EV ready, all of that good stuff. Then, as I highlighted with our goals, we are very keenly interested in indoor air quality and environmental quality, and having a healthy learning space for the students and the teachers. So we focus on daylighting. I gave my little spiel on an embodied carbon. So we've got a metric there about reducing it 20% compared to an equivalent baseline. I acknowledge that, what is the equivalent baseline? The reality is that the industry doesn't have a good one. Because the industry hasn't done a good job of tackling this issue yet. So that's one way in which this project can help contribute to the conversation, is we can at least identify what's a good baseline for our building type, and then what are some strategies to reduce the embodied carbon in ways that we can control. And then, of course, we do have LEED Silver certifiable that we will leverage as appropriate to cover issues like waste and landscaping and water and all of that stuff as well. So thank you, Kristen, for steering on the slides.
Sure thing. Yeah, so I'm going to actually stop sharing just for a bit so that we can have some discussion, but I'm happy to pull up anything as a resource or to refer back to based on questions.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for that really helpful overview. I want to open it up now to questions from starting with CAB members. And Kate, I guess before we do that, if there's anything you wanted to add first, feel free to jump in, but then we'll open it up to CAB questions.
I don't think so. I think I'll just
Okay,
see what questions come up.
great.
Well, I'll start off with one question.
Sorry, Michael, Warren beat you to it. I think
Oh,
I saw
goodness.
his hand up first. So we'll
Well,
go Warren first and then we'll go to Michael.
Okay, he's smarter.
This sounded really good, so I appreciate all the work everybody's done on this. Seems like it'll be a very good school. I had two questions. How does the square footage of the school compare to the square footage of the two schools it's replacing combined?
I have to look up the number to get it exactly, but I believe it's about 10 or it's smaller, actually.
Yeah,
When-
the new building's smaller by
Yeah.
at least 10,000 square feet, might be closer to 12.
Yeah, I was thinking it was, yeah, in the 10 to 20 range.
Good, good. And then it's good that you're focusing on embodied carbon. Can you give us some sense of what that's likely going to mean in terms of the types of building materials you use?
Yes, so right now, I mean, Matt talked about the baseline, right? And nationally, there's no specific guidelines. But right now, so your baseline is it's a little bit like an energy model. It's a theoretical baseline where you get the embodied carbon reduction is in concrete. So reducing cement in concrete, using recycled content in concrete and steel. So those are the two big ones that get part of that reduction that we're looking for. And then the other area we look into is insulation. So looking for, mineral wool is a little bit better, but staying away as much as possible from foam-based insulation. And the current evaluation of embodied carbon is focusing on the structure and the exterior, mostly specifically to LEED. But that doesn't mean this project shouldn't be looking at interior materials. So for example, ceiling tiles and gypsum, depending on how much you have. So you have to look not only in the content, but the quantity, and looking at alternatives, quantity alternatives between the baseline and the proposed design. And of course, in terms of the structure, there is an opportunity to look at wood. Wood is definitely a contributor to reduce the embodied carbon. So those are the materials that we're going to probably focus on. Would you agree, Matt? That's really where we're going to probably start.
Yep. Yeah. I think you got the whole list there, Martine.
Yeah. Those are
Thank
the biggie.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Warren. Okay, Michael, you're up now, and then we'll go to John and then Brian.
Happy to hear Matt talk about the laser focus on efficiency and efficiency first, and particularly trying to map that to passive house. I mean, getting to a 25 EUI, as the earlier slide showed what Sanborn was and where this is incredibly admirable. One of the themes I wanted to pick up on was the earlier go about inspire passion for learning. And I think if Peter Nichols were here, he would be talking a little bit more about that. The high school has this wonderful built into the programming dashboard, and it's used in the classroom for measuring the sustainability and the performance of all of the sustainability elements that went into that school. Are we thinking in the middle school to have the same kind of built-in curriculum where, you know, hopefully on the day that the students arrive and they walk into their classroom and they look up at their school and they see a solar system and many of the things they are not going to see, but they could be inspired by having a dashboard or that will become part of that learning curriculum. And I haven't heard much around that. So that's my question. How are we going to do that inspiration for learning, particularly around the sustainability attributes?
Yeah, great question. And, you know, I'm grateful you mentioned Peter, because we want to mention Peter anytime we can and all the inspiration he's brought us over the years and all of this work. So to me, it's going to be this amazing learning lab for the entire middle school population. And Kate knows we had been really making some nice progress on some district-wide efforts and building in quite a few sustainable initiatives. And COVID has just halted us in our tracks here. So we'll get back on track, and you know that work will continue. I think actually the middle school is going to be this driving light for the work that can lead up to it over the next few years, because we do want it to be that kind of setting and where we can just capture all the activity that's going on, but also have kids ready to maximize. I've listened to these folks long enough and done this long enough. It's about the human behavior in the building too, right? So we want to send our kids ready for that. And wouldn't it be great if they're doing it at all the schools and then doing it at home and everywhere else? Not just meeting EUI numbers over a building we built. So,
right.
And we know they change parent behavior too. I can testify to that. So we have a big vision here, I think, and the middle school is going to drive a lot of that work and kind of be a real threshold to reach so that we're ready when these doors open for maximizing what it can be.
That's fabulous. Great.
Yeah.
It's good to hear.
And the systems, Mike, will be ready to connect to the classroom. They'll be ready to track and monitor. It's all now backnet, you know, it's all data set up for data to be shared. And the one other thing I want to bring about environmental literacy is that there's a beautiful site that you have. So not only the system, but there's many other features of the school that are going to be sort of feeding that environmental literacy, from, you know, outdoor classrooms and what's going to happen on the site, you know, connection to pathways and that type of stuff. So
great.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
The connection to nature that the design team talked about in the design subcommittee meeting yesterday was really, really exciting.
Yeah.
John, I think you're next.
Thanks. I had I guess a couple questions and then maybe a comment. So I was wondering about water systems and especially how you're going to provide hot water, what the thinking is there. On the solar, I mean, it sounds like a good plan to work with CMLP to get panels installed, but I'm wondering what the substances behind that. Will it be a while before that happens, or is there a pathway to do that? Because obviously, the longer the building goes without solar panels, the more emissions accumulate, because these are cumulative emissions. And then I guess the last thing is a little bit surprised your lead goal is only silver. I mean, these days it seems like we can reach silver without really trying. So given all the stuff that you're doing, it seemed unambitious. So I was wondering if there was a rationale behind that.
Okay, so maybe Martine, if you want to start with the lead and the hot water.
right. So the project from the onset elected not to pursue the full certified for cost reason. Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's really, the silver is a minimum. it doesn't mean that we wouldn't achieve higher. And the new version of LEED, the V4, is much more stringent. So that's been much more than in the past. It's been more challenging to get to gold and platinum. But we do have projects that are very close to gold, some of these net zero projects. The net zero energy component does not bring that much more points because unfortunately, USGBC is still basing their energy points on energy cost. And the version, actually, if you go with the current version, the V4, it won't yet allow you to compare an electric system to an all-electric baseline. And we're actually in talks with them to get that happening because we have all the projects are going all electric. So just to give you, I don't want to go too much in details, but it's going to be potentially challenging to get to higher levels. I think, we'll see as we go. In terms of the hot water, it's all going to be electric. We're going to be looking at different systems, electric hot water, electric hot water, and then also the heat pump hot water version. So we'll be looking at that and doing life cycle costs for that during schematic design.
And then Kate, can you speak to MLP?
Yeah, so the town manager asked me to take the lead on coordinating with CMLP on the solar design. So the first step is getting a solar designer on board who will start with the feasibility and then work with SMMA and Hill throughout the building design process to design the solar so that it is ready to be installed around the time of the school construction or opening, specifically when that will be, we'll work through that as we get closer. But at last week's Light Board meeting, there was a pretty substantial discussion about what that would be and when that would be. So I won't go into too many details, but that's captured there. But there is a real commitment to get that installed, around the time of the building opening, not like years and years down the line.
Oh, that's great. And maybe it's too early, but do you have a sense of whether the size of the PV system will be able to, is there going to be enough roof space, I guess, to match the load?
We did a PV assessment during feasibility study. It varies, and I know there's a group in town that did their own, but we had in a sort of a 1.1 to 1.3 megawatt that will not fit on the roof. So the idea is to make both the roof and the parking canopy PV ready. So the site itself will be PV ready.
Great.
And John, I would just add my perspective on the lead is I agree with you. Silver is not very aggressive. My expectation is that if we did a full checklist, we would do better. I think it's a question of kind of focus and priority, and the desire that I believe we've heard strongly from the community is very focused on energy. And so that's where we've been talking about Passive House and the Easy Code, which are very aggressive, and we wanted to kind of focus on those and not, get I'm struggling for the right word, but make sure that we had the focus on where we were seeing the community demand.
Yeah, and Martine's explanation of the challenges with LEED. It was helpful, I think, for everyone to hear that because it provides the context for why you set the goals that way.
Right.
So
Yeah, and
it
I
all
think
makes sense to me.
one of the other things we talked about with the challenge with LEED is just the location of the school and a lot of the points around accessibility and transportation, just like we can't solve that in the location of the school. So that will be hard to get all the points there.
That makes it challenging for gold because right there you got probably 7, 8, maybe 10 points, that we can't get to. So,
Yeah,
But I
well,
think
that's
it's also,
been an issue. Right?
no, John, I think it's also true that USGBC is also catching up with respect to carbon. So that when you start looking at, these certifications, not having a very strong position for carbon um, leaves people in a very different place when we clearly know that that's the direction we go in, which is why, the efficiency first is so exciting about this school, and moving to renewable energy is so exciting. But it is a bit of a misnomer to have it at a silver level. But I don't think they've caught up yet, frankly.
We are,
No, I agree.
sorry to jump in. I know we're low on time. We've got about 5 minutes left in the scheduled time, and we can obviously take a little bit more, but I would like to move on. I think Brian Crounce, you had your hand up earlier. Just want to check in to make sure you still have a question. And then I know Courtney is also interested in asking a question, and then we can move to Pam and anyone else. So Brian?
Yeah, well, real quickly, just want to thank folks like Matt and Lori and everyone else for coming out tonight and spending so much time on this great project. Some of my questions or content of my question have been addressed already regarding the solar. My two questions were basically how significant would that be in the context of all the other, emissions related initiatives, embedded efficiency of the building and so forth? Because, it's obviously a very kind of high visibility thing, but it may not always be the biggest bang for the buck. And also just a comment, I'm looking back from 11 years ago, commentary on the high school building committee and how we're going to do solar there and where we're going to get solar. And I don't think we have panels there yet. So I am of the strike, I know there's a lot of hurdles to get over to get a school built, but I'm definitely of the strike while you can and get them built while you can. And I think the partnership with CC or with CMLP makes a lot of sense. And I just hope that works out. That's all.
Yeah, that's great. I know Matt's done a little bit of analysis on the carbon impact of embedded carbon versus the operational, and it's significant.
Yeah, I'm happy to share some numbers. I mean, before I say that, I guess I will also acknowledge that I've heard similar concerns from many other community members about how we haven't seen solar on some of the other buildings, not just school buildings, but other public buildings. And so that is where there is concern. And I think rightfully so, that's why there has been a lot of focus about making sure that there is solar on this middle school. And I get all that, and I respect all that. From my perspective as a building committee member, I don't think it's appropriate for us to be using the project funds to spend it on solar panels, because there are so many other needs, and there's just a better avenue to pay for the solar panels through CMLP. So I am optimistic that we will be able to make it work with CMLP on this project. I say that recognizing that it hasn't happened in the past, and so there is some kind of community concern about what's going to be different this time around. And I guess I'm just optimistic and hopeful that it can and will be. And I think there's recognition by the town and by the directive that Kate has been given to work with CMLP. So I think the signs are pointing in the right direction. Just to put into context, I mean, so with my caveat that there aren't great databases and resources on embodied carbon, when I plug in some basic building information into a really basic calculator, it says that for a steel building, and this will get back to kind of Martine's comments on material use, but for a steel building, it's roughly 4,000 metric tons of embodied carbon for this project. If it were a concrete building, it's 6,000. So that shows how that, decision of going from concrete to steel is one step, and then it gets lower too if it becomes wood. It gets into a messy discussion of how much credit do we take for the wood? Is the wood FSC certified? It's, that's a rabbit hole that we'll get into as we get further in the project. But at a very high level, let's say right now our baseline is about 4,000 metric tons. And given, you know, I hope I'm not stepping in a trap here, but if we use the carbon intensity numbers for Concord, the project at 25 EUI and based on our square footage needs about 1 million kilowatt hours of electricity to operate for a year. So taking the carbon intensity for Concord, that works out to about, I forget my number now, what was it, 226 metric tons of carbon, Kate, somewhere around there? So you can see just in terms of the scale, you know, I understand that there's concern about can we claim full credit for that carbon intensity? Even if we were to use the Massachusetts numbers, which the last number that I saw, Concord is about 30% better than the wider Massachusetts grid in terms of carbon intensity. But so if we use the carbon intensity for if we were in Lincoln, the number jumps to, I think it's 320 metric tons per year based on the operational emissions. So I think it does highlight the importance of needing to focus on embodied carbon, because we're talking, if we put solar panels up on day one and get those operating, they're avoiding that 220 to 320 metric tons a year, which is certainly important. But you compare that to the 4,000 metric tons that gets released before we even open the doors. And I think it highlights that we need to be focusing on embodied carbon. Sorry, I'm getting really dark here. I'm in a new location and I haven't figured out my whole lighting scheme here.
We can see you.
So,
Brian, any follow-ups or did that answer your question? Great. Okay. I know I saw Ruthie had a hand up. I don't know if Courtney or Ruthie were first. Courtney, why don't we go with you?
Sure. So I couldn't digest all those numbers, Matt, but thank you. Maybe.
I will share them with Kate.
Yeah,
and I know I'm giving you round numbers because it's been a few days since I've looked at them, so I forget them.
That's fine. I would be interested in that. I don't know if anyone else on CAT would be, but maybe my question is moot if I see the numbers, you know. But I was two things. Curious about the comment related to concrete, and I know concrete does have huge embodied carbon. And I'm just wondering, have you had success on other projects being able to use a less carbon intensive mix? I know it's been a struggle in the industry that I'm in, getting those through code sort of thing. And then the second question is related to stormwater, which we were focused more on the building, but I'm more focused in water and what I do. And I'm just curious if they're, and if you want to direct me somewhere to the plans, that's fine. But I'm curious about what the plans are outside of the building as much as inside.
So on the concrete, the recycled content on the concrete has been included for years because it was moved through the market through actually LEED, the early versions of LEED, in engaging the reduction of cement, and so because it was very highly energy, it's an energy hog to produce cement, way beyond any other material. Steel is second. So there are different components that you can use for recycling recycling material in concrete, and they do not affect the performance. So we've been doing that. Like I said, that's something that's usually very achievable. However, lately there's been some procurement issues, related to the fact that a lot of that recycled content comes from coal production,
Fly ash.
fly ash, and there's slag from the steel industry. But we put in the spec and we've been successful in achieving.
Okay, good.
Yeah, in achieving, and we are doing this embodied carbon modeling on all of our lead projects right now, and tracking. But to get to the 20% goal, it'll have to be more than concrete though. Concrete can get you maybe to 5, maybe to 10, depending on how much volume you have
Right.
as part of the project. And we're creating a database at SMMA. So we're starting to compare the different projects and starting to figure out that baseline. In terms of site, the stormwater is going to be all captured and treated on site and refilter. Obviously our landscape and civil engineers are best to talk about this, but it is definitely not going to the stormwater systems from what I understand, right, Kristen?
Correct. Yep.
Right.
Maybe another educational opportunity we can think about eventually.
Definitely.
Thanks, Courtney.
We will have in terms of environmental literacy, we usually include as part of the whole project signage that will describe the different features, and that would be one for sure.
Any last questions from other CAB members? I think one opportunity might be, if it's okay with the building committee team, if we have additional questions, we send something off. Maybe Kate can help coordinate getting some responses back, to just knowing we're short on time. I know I had a couple of things that a couple of my questions were answered, a couple that I still are open, but I don't want to be sensitive to time, and also provide a little bit of time for one or two questions from the public. So let's move on to that. Does anyone, I see Pam has a hand up, and then maybe we can take one other, but Pam, Pamela, if you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you. Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4, and it's going to be a short question. Thank you all, you're inspiring, but why is there going to be a generator, diesel or otherwise, instead of battery storage for backup?
Thanks, Pamela. Any thoughts on the generator?
Martine, I'm not sure if you can answer that.
This is something that's of the preference of the facilities management. I think there's and Matt, please fill in. That's the the mandate we started with. It is for discussion, but what I understand from the industry, though, Mrs. Dritt, is that energy storage is better used for demand response management than for backup energy. And it can be used for backup energy.
Why not both? Yeah.
My understanding of that, and I'm not a specialist with energy storage technology, is that it's really hard to do both with the current regulatory setting in Massachusetts. That's the answer I got from talking to people that are developing, designing, and installing energy storage now. There are projects that are looking for both, but it sounds like that's not the popular approach right now. And Matt, please fill in. I mean, if the project, I think if the discussion is to explore that venue, but that hasn't been brought up during feasibility and schematic. The understanding from the community was that they wanted a natural gas emergency generator.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'll just weigh in to say we've
no.
had very little conversation on this, so I would hate to sound like we were that committed to needing that. I think we have a lot more to talk about. So
schematic design is the best place.
Yeah, it's early, and I don't think
Well,
we've really settled this yet at this point.
Yeah, I
It's
think
kind
it
of silly
depends
to
on the,
have all electric use of the building and a backup generator of natural gas. Please don't do that. That's important.
We'll definitely continue the conversation in schematic design. As Lori mentioned, we're at a very early stage, and right now we're just forming a budget hold. And so we'll have those conversations in schematic design for sure.
Thanks for your input, Pamela. Brian Foltz.
Yeah, a big thank you to everyone on the call, because this project is going very well in focusing on meeting the educational need, but also being sustainable. It's not easy, and I'm very thankful that the committee has been very receptive to these ideas and has found a good balance budget-wise and so forth. I think that's all going very well. I do agree with Courtney's comment that I haven't heard much about the landscaping, are we doing natural or what's the plantings, what's the layout, so forth. I'd be interested in how are you going to capitalize on the bike path that's right behind the school so that kids can bike to school and have a place to lock up their bike, that kind of those details. And I understand their details, so they shouldn't be in the discussions today, but I look forward to them in the future.
I would just put in a pitch for, we were talking about the other day that there's going to be an eco charrette coming up. And so I think a lot of those discussions and creative ideas, there's a lot of opportunity for that. So we'll definitely keep you posted on the scheduling of that. But I would encourage you all to join for that, because I think that will be a lot of fun to talk about all those great opportunities for the site.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I want to, I know we're about 10 minutes over time for the building committee, and want to make sure that we're respectful of their evenings. So thank you so much to Kristen, Martine, Matt, as well as to Lori for joining us, and anyone else who was joining to help provide this overview. It's been super helpful. It's really great to get to see all the amazing work that you've been doing and that you'll continue to do. And thankfully we've got Kate as well to help keep us aligned on what's next. And everyone, just make sure you keep in touch and keep up to speed on upcoming meetings that we can participate in individually if we can't discuss it within CAB. So thanks again, everyone.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Terrific work.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Guys.
Appreciate your
Thank you.
time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Right.
Bye, Brian.
All right. So next topic, we're about 10 minutes behind, but we're going to transition to the biomass resolution. So I don't know, Kate, is that something you can pull up?
I can, yes.
Packet?
And I know Brad is here, so I don't know if you want Brad to introduce it or how you want to get going on it, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, if Brad, I don't want to put you on the spot, but it would be, I know this is really something you've been working on for some time and with CSAC, and it would be awesome if you wouldn't mind providing a quick overview of this. I know that the light board had supported it recently, and I believe you're working to get it in front of the select board, or maybe that already happened this week. I apologize, but if you could provide an overview, that would be great.
Sure. You can hear me?
Yes.
This, and I'm not prepared to do any fancy overview, unfortunately, but this is an issue that we've been thinking about. MCAN has, which I'm on the board of, has been thinking about this because they talk to a lot of the different MLP communities about what's going on there. And it came up, I believe, because Energy New England, which is the consortium that purchases our energy and stuff like that, has been supporting purchasing energy from the biomass plant to be built near Springfield. And the governor has been supportive of biomass as a renewable fuel. And I'm just not of the opinion that it is renewable in the same sense as the fuels we want to be using. biomass emits more carbon per unit of energy, and it has to grow back in order to really be considered renewable. But also we're facing a biodiversity crisis at the same time. So those are the kind of the outline of why we are interested in this. Other parts of the country where biomass has been a big business, like in the southeastern United States, they're cutting down entire forests, because when you build a market like that, it has to be fed. And so this was one plant that they're talking about in Springfield, but there could be others, and there could be a growing industry, and it just seems the wrong way to go. So this resolution is patterned off of what MCAN had discussed with a number of groups. It captures the essence of why I am and why CSEC voted to approve this as well. I don't think the select board has voted on this yet, so they may be waiting on you. And we just want to say clearly from our citizens and from the light plant, we don't want this stuff. We don't consider it a good direction for to be even part of the renewable portfolio standard. I hope I captured that well enough.
Yep, no, that sounds great. Thanks for that overview, Brad, appreciate it. And Kate, was there anything you would add to this? I think the question before us was whether CAB wants to vote to, essentially sign on to this, to provide support to essentially communicating to the state that, we're in opposition to allowing biomass plants to essentially be counted as renewable energy within the state RPS. So we just think overall it will be more, it will send a more powerful message if there's alignment across the various committees as well as the select board in the town, and sort of communicating that back to the state that hopefully they'll take action on this issue and in the direction that we're potentially supporting if CAB decides that we want to support this. Michael, you had a question?
Brad, can I ask a question I'm curious about? Because it's very similar to what we've been trying to do with home rule petition and various other mechanisms. Are there other cities and towns similar to what we've been doing with home rule, the 17 or so that have been engaged, doing precisely the same language and the same, whether it's a bylaw article or a message to the state to stop using biomass? Where does
the answer is yes, that and I can't remember exactly, but I know Belmont and Reading and some other communities have signed something very similar to this, signed on. There was an email in the email thread today about it, but I can't remember exactly which ones.
I mean, tactically, it'll be effective to the select board to hear that it's not, one or two communities, but in fact, there's a groundswell of beliefs around this, and that fits into the overall strategy of getting off of, fossil fuels, or certainly contributing carbon.
Yeah. I'm just looking for that, but I can't find it. So I see a couple of hands up, but I'm not wondering.
Brian Krauns, you had a question as well.
Yeah, so, and I apologize if you articulated it. Well, background is I'm historically kind of a cautiously pro biomass person. When I was looking through my notes for the last high school, one thing on the ideas list was cogeneration through biomass. That was 11 years ago. And I realized there's ways to do, biomass electrical production that's definitely not something we'd support. But I do, and you can disabuse me of this notion that it is possible to also have biomass energy production in a way that is arguably sustainable or more sustainable. So I just need more information on where the current thinking, our current thinking is on the science behind that, particularly as it pertains to New England forestry as opposed to like Southeast forestry, which is a different domain, I think. That's all.
Thanks, Brian. It's a good question. I think there is something in this resolution that does mention, previously that wood burning biomass plants that we're doing kind of combine heat and power are viewed as efficient and carbon efficient as well. And I think it's really focused on kind of the changing of those standards that allow other plants, but I don't have the detail on that. So maybe if Brad or anyone else has more detail on that, that might be helpful.
Really.
Can I speak up on this? I
Sure.
strongly support this resolution. The state spent a lot of time, a lot of effort doing a very, very good study like 9 years ago on the emissions impact of biomass use for electricity generation, and pretty conclusively concluded that it was a bad idea if it's just being done in electricity generation without any thermal uses. The highest value use of biomass for energy is in a thermal use such as a wood pellet burner replacing an oil burner. The lowest environmental use of biomass is in electricity generation without thermal use. The state basically came up with this regulation that gave wood burning biomass plants only partial credit under the RPS. That was pretty much a political decision to sort of split the baby because there was a lot of political support behind biomass. But if you were to just do it on the merits of the science, you would say we should not be doing it. And certainly it's one thing to be continuing to support existing biomass plants that are out there. We certainly shouldn't be building new ones.
Thanks, Warren.
Take my hand down.
Any other feedback? I can't see everyone here.
John has his hand up.
John, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I agree with Warren. I mean, it's not something I'm an expert on exactly, but every study I've seen that, was objective seems to find that biomass is not, ends up being a net emitter when you consider sort of the life cycle of operating a plant, because you've got to use equipment and trucks to move that wood around. And then there's also the issue of, well, how much is the new forest growth going to really uptake the carbon emissions? So I would tend to support this. My only concern was sort of more on the equity grounds of, I didn't know, I'm aware of the proposal in Springfield, but I wasn't sure how the community actually felt about it there by seeing this draft resolution that the city of Springfield passed a resolution opposing the plant. So it sounds like the community doesn't want it either. So, I didn't want to be in a position of a wealthy, well-off community telling a less well-off community what to do. But that doesn't seem to be the case here. So I think I feel pretty comfortable supporting the resolution.
Thanks, John. Courtney?
I wasn't sure if I was on mute. Forgive my ignorance on this. Is there this looks like it's very specific to wood burning. Is there any renewable biomass that Is anybody doing this with a biomass that's not wood, wood? And I mean, it sounds like this is very specific to the, to wood burning. So I think in general, I would support as well, but does it preclude anything else that might be out there? Any innovation that, we might be considering? Not being in this field, I don't know myself. I'm just curious. I'm gonna guess that's no.
Does anyone else on CAB have any insights into that, Warren?
There's nothing in the short-term horizon for Massachusetts, to the extent that there's biomass that could be more environmentally beneficial.
Okay.
Things like switchgrass, it tends not to be something being pushed in this region, and not so much being used for electricity. These regulations could always be modified by the state if there is a biomass supply on the market that is environmentally sustainable. But the moment, the only one being used for electricity generation is not so sustainable.
Okay, thanks.
I think I found the studies from a decade ago, so thanks.
So is CAB ready to take a vote on this? I think just for context, the Light Board has already supported this resolution. CSEC has already supported this resolution. And we've heard some good feedback from other members of CAB already. Again, it's really focused on the incentive structure and the change to the incentive structure. So obviously these plants still could be built if the commercial entities felt like they could make money, but this is really trying to avoid taxpayer dollars going to fund these types of plants. So does anyone want to make a motion to vote to support this resolution? Warren, you're on mute.
Yes, thank you. I move that CAB should support this resolution.
Michael, you're seconding?
Second.
Yeah, I would second that, and maybe add one other piece to it, that particularly if we want to get the select board, is there any kind of legal review? There was some language I saw in the shared document that said something about legally reviewing or something, but is that necessary, or do we feel we have enough of a groundswell that we don't really need to have any kind of suggestion that there be a legal review?
I think because it's Kate can correct me, but I think because it's a resolution that's really just kind of putting a position and putting a stake in the ground. It's not, I think we just need to make sure that, the language says the CAB supports, right now this version says the select board. So we would basically go in and update that to make sure it's reflecting of this group. But none of the other context, the content would change.
Okay.
Is that correct, Kate?
Yeah, it's a non-binding resolution, so I think the select board can consider whether they want to send it to the state.
Great. Well, it certainly doesn't seem consistent in any way. If you're looking through the select board lens, this is not, it does not fit to have biomass and still have Article 51 when you're actually adding carbon. It doesn't make sense. So hopefully they'll see that misconnection, that it's pretty hard to support having a biomass approach.
Okay, let's, I know we had a motion and a second, so let's take a vote for all those in favor of this resolution, as long as, making the adjustments that it's specific to CAB and aligning with CSEC and the Light Board who've already signed on. I can work with Kate on amending the language, but all those in favor of this resolution against this kind of biomass, raise your hand, please. Okay, I see unanimous vote for. Thank you. Great. All right, we'll get working on that and then figure out how we want to get this in front of the select board and who will do that. I can work offline on that. Okay, we are pretty short on time for the next topic, which is home energy scores, which I was going to review. I want to get folks' thoughts on whether you want to dive into that. I believe, John, you have to leave a little early. And we also ideally would have some time for public comment. So what do folks want to do about home energy scores? Do you have enough energy to listen at least through that topic? I can go through it. I think I can probably fly through it in 15 minutes. It's not going to be much time for discussion, and we can have discussion later, or we can push it to the next meeting. Any thoughts?
I think we should push it to the next meeting. I don't want to shortchange it.
Okay. Any other
That's my
counter arguments?
Well, we have what in terms of
Suggest
time?
the opposite and say we could introduce it and then discuss with the next one, but
Right.
it's either way.
Either way, it's fine.
Well, we have how many? We have a half hour, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in 30 minutes, if you did a 10 or 15, tee it up.
Yeah, why don't we just jump in, and then we can have time for, we can allocate some time for discussion, which we probably would need to do anyway.
Right.
Okay, so let me start presenting. Hopefully this works.
It was great getting in the meeting packets of sort of the different places where they've tried this. This was very helpful, particularly Portland.
Okay, can you guys see my screen and the first slide?
Yes, but we're in that presenter mode.
Oh, you're seeing the,
I think if you go to display settings, you can switch.
did that work?
Yeah,
there we go. Yeah, that's
cool.
Good.
All right, guys. So here we go. So I'm going to cover why this matters and then go through the home energy score program and some review of what's happening out there, and then like what's happened in Massachusetts and some potential ideas for Concord. As Michael mentioned, there's some examples in the packet you guys can take a look at. Sorry, I'm just going to minimize this so I can see. So why does this matter? Number one, I mean, obviously we should focus on this if it's going to have an impact. And from Kate's own analysis, residential buildings are 32% of the total emissions, almost a third. And then residential buildings are almost 55% of total emissions in Concord as of 2019. So it's a big opportunity. And I think most of us are familiar with the challenges with energy efficiency. And I'm not an energy efficiency expert, and I've probably missed a bunch of stuff here, but there's a lot of gaps in terms of visibility to energy and carbon information, benchmarking, what types of tactics should you pursue if you're a homeowner or you're in an apartment, et cetera, and then how do you finance it? And we've talked about some of these in the past. So the home energy score is one tool that's designed to help address some of those gaps in information and provide a mechanism to compare homes across the board, regardless of where the homes are located, the size of the house, and weather and all of that information. So it's a DOE program, and they've been working on it for a number of years now, and they've made a lot of improvements over the last, I think, 8 or 10 years from what I can see from the research I did. So it's really kind of like a rating. The lower the score, actually the worse off. The higher the score, the better off. And it's really designed to help kind of give a really simple to understand, quick synopsis of like where this home compares to other homes, and then how much your energy costs, and then how much you could potentially save with some specific recommendations. And all of this is tied to an assessment that is done. And these assessments can be performed by a lot of different people. There's tons of different assessors all across the US that do either energy assessments or other inspections and things like that. So it doesn't necessarily take expertise. And it takes about an hour or so for the assessors to do the work. I won't read through all of these, but this is just a snapshot of kind of overview. One important point of the program is it's what's called an asset rating. So it's looking at how is a building designed. It's not looking at the behavior and actual operation of the building. So those two things can oftentimes be different, right? So you can build a super efficient building, but if you're wasting energy left and right and operating it, that has impacts where you can be really efficient. So I provided another snapshot of how this compares to other energy systems. So like the HERS rating, some of you may be familiar with, is a little bit more comprehensive. One of the differences that I want to point out between this system and HERS is that the energy score will always penalize a house that's larger because of the heating and cooling load that larger houses have, whereas a system like HERS is comparing against similar sized houses. And so you can actually have a very low score in HERS, low is good in HERS, and it doesn't necessarily mean like it's not necessarily penalizing larger homes because of the way that system works. That's my understanding, what I've sort of read in the research. So who is using this home energy score? It's not a huge number of cities and utilities that are participating. Portland, Oregon, and Berkeley, California are two of the largest, but Fort Collins is also doing it, and then a bunch of utilities. And then there's also a number of efficiency programs that are tied to different parts of like the homeowner process that aren't necessarily using home energy score. So like Minneapolis and Austin and other cities have some sort of energy efficiency communication process in place. So there is more than just this home energy score. I'm really focused on this because it's kind of a universal system and has support from DOE, which is good. And they're providing a lot of funding and technical support for the program, which is helpful for communities of our size. But this just gives you a sense of where the scores have been occurring, and then where assessors are as well on the right there. Okay, so there's a lot of text on this, and I won't read through all of it, but I just wanted to give you guys some more context of like what Portland, Oregon, I think is a great example of this as far as a city really embracing home energy scores and developing a program. And I'm sorry, did someone have a question?
I cleared my throat, sorry.
Oh, no problem. And so one of they've been working on this for a number of years, and they were finding that this sort of voluntary approach that they had was really only scratching the surface. And they have a similar, surprisingly, have a similar mix in terms of, residential being about 50% of their building emissions. So they decided they needed to go down this mandatory process, and they're impacting about 10 to 12,000 homes every year out of 160,000, which is a significant, improvement over when they had the voluntary program. And they've done a lot of customization on the report. and I just by accident went down to the next example, but I'll share that. I think just a couple of things. There were a lot of concerns about the number of assessors, and that they've had plenty of assessors. The cost was also a concern, and it's actually been quite reasonable. And there's been really positive feedback. They did a report after a couple of years that was required, and I think they were very positive about the overall program progress, and they were encouraged by the reception that homeowners had. So this is the actual example of Portland's version of the home energy score. There's 2 pages, and this is a real example that I pulled down. I believe it's a real example that I pulled down from their site. And so you can see, it's got a more prominent kind of view into energy usage and costs. And again, this is all based on an assessment that's required before you put up a home up for sale. And it's all based on estimated usage. There's no actual data. And then they also share kind of the carbon footprint. In this case, everything's from left to right, worse to better. And then they give you energy savings of specific improvements. And they tend to prioritize anything that's 10 years or less of payback gets kind of the first, there's only one example here where it's like we're basically replacing your water heater when you need to look for an Energy Star water heater essentially. And there's other things that have longer term paybacks that are listed below. So that's Portland. One of the things I also checked on was how this worked with their MLS. So they have a requirement that you're supposed to, basically put the home energy score on the listing service, and you have to have a link to it. And I didn't see that happening in a very small sample. So I think that's one of the gaps maybe in the process. I'm sure that someone can get it if they ask for it, but it's not necessarily completely integrated into their process today, even though it's supposed to be. Okay, so I'm just flying right along here. So Massachusetts, what's the situation in Massachusetts? We actually have, there's been work on what's called an energy performance score, and I'm pretty sure it has the same back-end system as Portland and various other communities. So it's using that same back-end assessment, but it's presenting it in a different way, and that's one of the benefits of the tool is you can really customize it. So they did a pilot, DOER did a pilot of several thousand homes, and they saw a significant increase in the conversion of homeowners basically making improvements compared to the Mass Save Usual assessment. And they saw 25% increase in savings as well. So that's kind of a testament to the impact of the program versus just the standard Mass Save assessment that doesn't have this scorecard. And there was positive feedback. And I think that, that kind of initial pilot has led to support for it. And I think DOER has been advocating for this for a number of years. And in fact, it's come up, both 2018 and 2019, it's come up. And, Governor Baker has been supportive of it and, said a lot of good things about it. I think the struggle has been the real estate industry has really pushed back, which I think this is true with every community that's pursued this. There's definitely concerns that older homes that have less insulation, have older systems, aren't going to score well, and so it's going to be there's going to be a bigger burden on folks who own those homes, which may include low-income homeowners, and it's going to be harder for them to sell those homes because now there's visibility to the costs of operating them as well as the cost of potentially upgrading it. So it's a legitimate concern, although from what I've seen in Portland, it hasn't been they haven't seen that kind of negatively impacting lower scoring homes. Different climate, different situation than in our area, but just something to keep in mind. So basically none of the legislation that's been proposed has been able to get anywhere, and it's not in the climate bill that is now under consideration. So digging down into the situation in Concord, you know, right now we don't really have visibility into energy and carbon use at the home level. This is my actual bill. We're an all electric home, and so there's a lot of electricity use, and we also have solar, so there's some of that, and you'll see there's some challenges with the way that some of this information is communicated. You know, for example, the data is presented as this is your February usage, and all of the days are from, but except for a couple, are from January. So just it's not the best presentation in terms of understanding your usage and understanding how you compare. There's no benchmarking to other homes, et cetera. And then there's no carbon emissions information. So I think as the light plant obviously continues to improve in decarbonization, they actually have a great story to tell relative to electricity versus the other fuels that people are using in their homes. So one question I'll just throw out there, and this is peripherally related to home energy scores, but and could play a part. But you know, one question I wonder is, you know, what if the light plant was able to provide some sort of dashboard to homeowners, and would that visibility help improve people's willingness to invest in energy efficiency? And if combined with the right incentives, could it really help drive residential energy efficiency improvements? So could they take existing data that they already have, obviously electricity and their water use and everything else, could they potentially find a way to tap into National Grid or other utility data? Could they maybe do a homeowner survey to capture some of this data? I know that, you know, it's been a challenge for Kate and is just a challenge for the town in general in terms of what updates have people made in their homes, what are their current systems, et cetera. And could that somehow tie into maybe a home energy score type backend system that's essentially being given by free by DOE to sort of provide some additional visibility to existing light plant customers? A lot that would be required to do that, but you know, it's just a question I wanted to pose. So I know I'm covering a lot and we're close on time, but I'll just got a few more slides. Here are 3 options that, you know, I thought of for, you know, this potential for home energy score. So this could be led by the light plant in some way, form or fashion for existing homeowners, probably without any sort of listing requirement, which opens up a whole nother set of challenges. It could be some sort of town policy, or you could have potentially a combination of, or a variation of those kinds of themes. So what if the light plant adopted some sort of home energy score? There are different benefits and challenges to that. I mean, I think some of the benefits versus the town doing it are potentially driving efficiency and adoption faster. Instead of having this be a requirement when a home is put up for sale, it could be communicated to existing homeowners when it's ready by the light plant in a proactive way and supported, versus it being a requirement and then potentially no action being taken on it. And it's also potentially a great tool for the light plant to promote their electrification, to promote decarbonization. There's a lot of data collection potential benefits to it. But also, obviously, there's a bunch of challenges, right? So it's like, how would you fund it? How does this overlap with Mass Save? What are the resources required? So there's a lot of important topics that would need to be reviewed and discussed. And obviously, the light plant would need to decide that this is something that they are open to pursuing and is part of their larger strategy. And then if the town of Concord adopted it, this is a little bit more of shifting the burden to sort of the citizen or the sellers of homes in Concord. There's kind of that guaranteed trigger, and it provides that visibility to new homeowners, which would be missing kind of if the light plant were just doing it. You'd have to figure out, like, if I'm about to buy a home, can I get access to that? There would need to be some discussion around whether that's critical or not. So other challenges, I won't go through all of these. You guys can take a look afterwards. But that is all I had. I guess I made it through most of it. Hopefully some of that sunk in. But I will share those slides. I did not get any input from Kate, so hopefully I didn't, cross any major lines there with that. But just a thought starter. I know we only have 10 minutes left. Any quick thoughts or feedback? Michael?
You're on
I think
mute.
you're on mute.
I
There
think
you
at
go.
the 10,000 foot level, I think you're right, thinking that CMLP would be the place to nest this, right? Because they would be able to put that out, in their bills, and they would be able to have that one data point. And it almost seems like a really good fit now, because they have changed. As we know, it was impossible to read the electric bill when it was coming to you originally, right? And they made it much more graphic, user friendly, with the bubbles, and you can see. And I really wonder how much of a heavy lift it would be to create some data algorithms that would provide, at least at the first step, just where does my home fall out in terms of its carbon, right? And that would be something that we could explore. There's a lot here, and there's to do, and I think it's headed down the right track. One of the investor-owned utilities, particularly National Grid, had a home energy report, and for those of you that are gas customers, you get that once a month, and you see on that they started off initially with providing a whole lot of data, and they realized that what really motivated customers, oddly enough, was that how did their house compare to their neighbors? And all of a sudden there was this sort of competitive nature, and it was hugely successful in going to a significant amount of savings, because of course the follow-up to that was, my goodness, how in the world could my neighbor be beating me? So then they identified the things that you could do, right? Setting your thermostat back, all of those other strategies. It surprised me, but as a rating system and as a motivator, if it's structured right, it does have an impact.
Yeah, I remember reading about, I think it's O Power, who sort of was the engine behind that. And they are able to demonstrate that does have a positive impact. I think there are some people though who are ahead of their neighbors who like slide back because they're like, oh, well, maybe I'll turn the heat up because I'm better than my neighbor. So this month I'm gonna be nice and toasty warm. So, but yeah, it's definitely, I've heard it's changed behavior and helped folks focus on efficiency, which is all, obviously what it's about. Thanks. I see Warren. Yeah, Warren, go ahead, and then we'll get to Brad.
3 comments. This was really helpful and very good. I wondered whether we should consider a combination of the light plant doing something along with ratings. One of the problems with the rating comparison now, if you're talking about electricity as opposed to natural gas, what happens is somebody buys an electric car and they start looking worse than their neighbors.
Right.
And then the final thing I would say is I hate the real estate industry's objection to this. What the real estate industry is in effect saying, we want to keep tricking customers into buying inefficient houses that are going to cost them more to operate than they expect. That's the only justification for their position.
Right. Thanks, Warren. Any other, so let's jump to public comments because I know we've only got 5 minutes left, and I see Brad, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a question whether if you know whether the home MVP MPG study, which I think is very relevant, included homes with delivered oil heat, because that's kind of one of the difficulties here, I think. And especially in the next 10 years when we want to be shifting lots of those oil people to electricity, we kind of don't know.
Yeah.
I believe it probably did, because I think it was, a rural, in addition to Springfield, there are a bunch of rural areas around there. I would have to look into the detail, but I 100% agree. I think there's now a lot of the visibility to the oil, homeowners using oil is coming through Mass Save that then end up probably getting transitioned to gas versus electricity.
Right.
So if the light plant could be more proactive in identifying and reaching out to those oil-based customers and providing a solution that's electricity-based versus relying on Mass Save, or somehow collaborating with Mass Save. I know Mass Save plays an important role. We could get directly to electricity instead of being stuck with a fossil fuel system for another 10, 15 plus years. So, okay. I think everyone's flagging, including myself. Any other questions though in the last couple minutes? Obviously we can share the deck that I flew through, and we can maybe have a follow-up conversation put on the next agenda for any sort of next steps or thoughts. And if you have anything else that comes up and you want to share, feel free to send me feedback via email as well. Kate, was there anything else on the agenda that I'm missing that we needed to cover today?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
I would just,
go ahead, Courtney.
I would just agree. I would like the chance to talk about it a bit more. I only partially was able to digest everything. So, but I thought it was great, and thanks for sharing it and bringing it to our attention.
Sure
but I'd
thing.
like the chance to discuss it a bit more.
Okay.
Yeah, we can add to another agenda. I see Brian has his hand up, so you
Yes.
take public
Brian
comment.
Folds.
Yeah, it's a great topic. I think this is very interesting. I would take a look at Concord Light's Smart Hub in their billing system. It's available to all customers, and it does do some breakdown of some data. It's more granular about patterns of energy consumption for electricity rather than it is comparison. But it's the kind of tool that you might be looking for CMLP to integrate with.
Yeah, I did actually recently download that app, and for some reason the usage data isn't loading for me yet, but it does look promising in terms of providing more visibility. And I think it's another tool that could be used to, as they continue to evolve, sharing information and dashboards or whatever it may be. I think it's a great tool in the tool set to support efficiency and benchmarking and things like that.
I've had the app now for a few months, and it still is having data issues. So I think they've focused on getting the core billing process done correctly before they kind of moved on to make sure everybody's getting the right data on this tool. So it has a great opportunity for improvement. All right, I'll let you go. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. I think I need a motion to adjourn in a second, and then we will vote.
I move to adjourn.
Ruthie.
All right. Let's vote
Starving.
to adjourn, everyone, in support. All right. Thank you all. Thanks for your attention. I know it's a long meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night.
Bye.